I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. Reporting live 5 hours from our house. Are we going to put this out this week?
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could just put it out tonight. We finish it and
We're a couple days late.
Drop it. No edits.
We recorded one for last week, or did we two? Just one.
We tried one last week.
We tried one
on Sunday, and it didn't work.
I like talking about like current events and how they intersect with the shift in consciousness. But sometimes the current events are just too matrixy, you know?
Yeah, and I think also it's sometimes those things need to simmer a little bit before, you know, you start to get to a dialogue and talk about it. There's still stuff coming out. There's still not clarity on what's true and all of that. I think that last one we were kind of in the middle of a cacophony of new information that like just didn't feel good to talk about right now.
Yeah, I really don't like to share my immediate thoughts on things. I don't know if I said that on an episode we actually put out, but I have like a fast sacral. I have like a fast intuitive knowing for myself, but my immediate impression on things often isn't where I land.
Yeah.
I mean, I often don't stay in any perspective, but...
It's funny, it's hard right now, though, with so much happening, so much transition and shifts going on, that it's I think we've taken on in these last 4 or 5 episodes, like just wanting to talk about that because it is kind of the talk of the town. But I agree, it's some of that stuff needs to sit for a little bit before you can have a like grounded kind of perspective on it that is useful, not just conjecture and kind of repeating what other people have said. It's like
we really run the risk of getting like rabid and getting so caught up in your own bias, which, speaking of that, real quick, I think I quoted the thing about the people with the water, the billionaires with the water in California.
Did you not clarify that in the last one?
We didn't put it out.
Oh.
So there was a soundbite going around, or a tweet, I don't know, that 2 billionaires owned 80% of the water in California. And I think I repeated that on the podcast. I had seen an interesting video that was kind of explained the complexities of California's water system. And the couple, the Resnicks or whatever, they were involved in that. And it was 80% of California's water goes to agriculture. And then the critique on them is that their quote unquote agriculture is like boutique shit that we probably don't need. You know, the way they sell big ag is like, that's how we feed the world. But then you have people just taking a ton of resources to make things we don't really need, like pomegranate juice, you know, that like most people can't even afford. So I don't know. I think I just, in passing, quoted that 80% of the water thing, which was not accurate.
You're spreading misinformation.
I was spreading misinformation. So the reason I want to say that, someone caught it in the comments. The reason I want to say that is this is definitely not the place to get your facts, especially if it's something that I say, like, you know, as an aside. It's just not. I don't want the pressure of being the place you get your facts. We don't have a producer sitting here Googling everything we say. And that's just not what the premise of the podcast is. The premise of the podcast is like, this is our normal living room conversation. And I just don't, it just will make me start censoring myself if I'm not just freely talking. You as the listener, you know, it's your responsibility to look into things and not just take everything we say at face value. Because even if I did like research it, my impression of it might be, that's easy for me to believe without doing a deep dive because I have a bias that that's how the whole thing is set up at this point, right? And so there's a lot of that going around right now. It's like someone can be shitty and have shitty intentions, and also we can fall for conspiracy theories about them. And we got into that on the episode we got rid of. I think I'm going to get into that more on my Patreon.
Yeah. I think in general, too, it reminds me of this, like, that I think we both are constantly having to remind ourselves of this, is that the temptation to get caught up in the minute details everywhere and trying to blot out all the misinformation, find the truth, and I think we do get kind of caught in the sliding narratives that are going around and get too invested in something that is kind of transient and is like really in a transitional phase. And when I feel that, like, it kind of looks like I get caught in scrolling on TikTok and seeing many different perceptions of what's going on and resonating with some, really not resonating with others, and then wanting to try to find, okay, where do I stand? And I need to speak about that. And, you know, that it can be helpful at times, but I feel like when I'm caught in that, I try to come back to a place where, like, I can ground my own perspective down that is just mine, like making sure that I'm not just taking on these other perspectives that I resonate with.
Right.
And carrying forward something that, like, maybe isn't fully me, I resonate with, but it hasn't been grounded into, like, well, no, what do I think? What do I really feel? And I think that's the hardest lesson in all of this, is like we're having to learn that the reality is fully you. Like, there's so many aspects that are controlled via your consciousness, whether that's projecting onto someone else or misunderstanding and all of that. And so the real focus I think to make it through this portal is constantly coming back to yourself and what is real for you, no matter what someone else thinks. And that kind of might get into our next conversation about audience capture. I think there's like that phenomena is usually talked about via like artists and entertainers, but I think it's also in this kind of spiritual world and where we're, observing what other people that are conscious are their perspectives on what's going on. And we can kind of slide into wanting to agree with the masses of whatever the spiritual TikTok like statements are, their perspectives. And then we want to be on the right side. So we just jump into that perspective and take someone else's perspective on when it might not be like really what we're seeing and what we feel to be true. That could be something that is maybe outside the box that should be shared as well as like an alternative perspective, but we might not have the courage to embody that and do that because the fear of not being seen as weird and that's a wacky take and you don't know what you're doing,
Or being like excommunicated from your quote unquote side or team.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think when people hear tribalism versus individuality, they hear together or alone, where it's really just an approach to how we look at things and we look at the world. And so something I've noticed in my own consciousness in the last few years, like 2020 to 2023, it was really prevalent, was I would resonate with several things that someone said, and then it would be confusing for me when they would have an opinion that didn't match
that idea.
Yeah. Because I'm like conditioned from tribalism that everyone has to fit into these homogenized things. And it's so subtle we don't realize. And when you have like the left, right, or materialist, spiritualist, it's fun to talk about those things. But I think what we are being forced to understand is complexity. And complexity is an individual. Like we're being forced to experience each other as individuals that can't be painted with a broad brush, that can't be monolith. So I keep seeing like Candace Owens as an example of someone who keeps having these takes that don't fit her role as this right wing, whatever. Like she has these takes where she's breaking from them. So then they don't like it. And then I see people on the left, quote unquote, the left, people who don't usually like her saying, how is this happening? I'm agreeing with something she's saying. And I think that's going to keep happening because we're being forced to break out of this monolithing thing that tribalism does. And we're being forced to open up to the complexity of seeing each individual human as an individual with its own wiring, including ourselves, right? And so that's what so much deconditioning and, working on masking and finding out that you're actually neurodivergent if that's your experience, and that your sexuality doesn't fit in a box, and that your personality doesn't fit here, and that maybe your political beliefs don't actually fit in a whatever. It's because moving into an individual age just doesn't mean we're alone. It means we are experiencing ourselves and others as complex human beings. And when you think about what it's, we're in the growing pains right now, but what the implications of that are in the future for things like art and innovation and everything else. But we just keep having these same lessons over and over again about painting people with a broad brush, and myself included. Billionaires was a big one that I've already been yelled at by the aliens 5 years ago for just casting this group of people into a whatever, and then they're almost like grayed out in my consciousness as like not human.
All billionaires.
Yeah. And I used to do this with like conventionally attractive people and people with any kind of privilege and people who'd never done and I had so many experiences in the last few years where I'm being forced to see the complexity in each person and see past the character that I'm just kind of slapping onto people and the character that they're taking on by being a part of groups or whatever. And, you know, that goes two ways. That goes villainizing, but it also goes pedestalizing. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason that we are moving towards that is because there is a ceiling to what you can experience in consciousness.
Yeah.
If we don't see each other as and ourselves as complex human beings. Like if we don't see, if we just cast people into giant groups according to the color of their skin or their sex or their sexuality or their, you know, political beliefs or whatever, and then we don't let them veer out.
Yeah, we try to keep them in that one box that they have claimed to be a part of instead of letting them potentially naturally evolve outside of that. I find it hard too, funny, because I'm a lot of times viewing on social media like artists kind of coming out of their shell and starting to find their authenticity. And I've always, like, when I do sessions, it's if someone has been really locked in like a people-pleasing modality or is afraid to be authentic, and they have to work out and kind of discover what is actually them by putting things out, and for the first time being vulnerable and making art, and like how scary that is, how much pressure's on that. But there are so many artists, and some that I've talked to on sessions, that are now like, they're going for it. Like, we've had a conversation, they've been able to center and go, oh yeah, there's nothing else to do but just jump and be authentic. I want to find that. But in the beginning, it can be a learning process. It's like you might put a couple things out and you're thinking this is you, and then in a month you've grown and now you're like, oh no, but this is cringy now. I want to be more evolved and I've got these other ideas. And so a lot of those times, you know, when I'm viewing art, it's really difficult for me to stay out of the judgment zone of wanting to quickly stay, oh, this isn't it, you know. But when I can sense they're being authentic and they're just they're figuring it out, it's like, why do I need to judge that and put it in a box where this isn't good art? No, I think at the end of the day, it's like the only processing of judgment towards any of those things does it seem like they're being authentic? Does it seem like they're really courageously trying to express this inner thing that is so scary and they've blocked up for so long? If that's true, then it's like, it doesn't matter if it's like dorky or not my thing. They're going for the authenticity and they're going to evolve and move towards that. So it's funny because it's ironic, in my session, I'm constantly just trying to encourage people, you know, find your authenticity and don't give two shits what anybody's going to think about that. You have to trudge forward and you will find your truth. And in that process, you're going to find that people really like and want what your individuality is. It might not be a million people. It doesn't really matter moving forward. As long as you find your audience, even if it's 100. And that's the thing that I'm always bucking against, like being in the industry for 10 years and seeing how many people were so focused on the awards, is like, we're not successful unless we get a Grammy. And you're like, that's the main focus. And that's the scale of judging what's good or bad art. Are they at the award ceremony? Did they get nominated? Did they win one? That means they're good. When I think we're moving into a reality that's not going to be the case anymore. You're not going to be celebrating art and giving awards to it in the same way, because we're realizing that's like homogenizing the process, and it's got people just hunting for the recognition instead of the individual diversity, the uniqueness. Like, that should be celebrated. So yeah, I think I'm just stating that because I realize, like, as much as I'm pushing these theories, I still fall into the trap of quick judgment that is not really, it's outside the bounds of just assessing, is this person attempting to authentically express? If that's the case, and it's like, beautiful, that needs to be there for someone somewhere. Somebody wants that. Or this is just a process of them learning who they are. And in the beginning, it might not be exactly accurate, but you have to start somewhere, you know, and move through that. And so,
yeah, I think we pivoted into talking about art, so we should read You should read that post from Alex Ebert.
Yeah, we've talked about it on here before, audience capture. I believe we have.
I'm sure we have
on this podcast. And audience capture is definitely something that I feel like I experienced in my band near the end. And I didn't have a term for it, so it was harder to get my head around like what it actually was that I was uncomfortable with in the band. But I had felt like in the beginning, our band was really set on just expressing authenticity. We had been so burnt by the business, constantly blowing smoke and that never really working, that I think we got broken down to a point where we were trying to play that game, give the labels what they want and like bend towards it. And it just was constantly not working, that we were burnt out and just kind of like, let's just make what we want to make. Fuck this. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And the second we kind of went into that perspective is when we made a lot of the first like successful record, and it took off right when we stopped fucking caring what anybody thought. And we're not trying to make the business happy. But then as we got success and the pressure and the expectations all kind of piled on, we slowly started to lose touch with that inner space that was authentic, that just wanted to express for expression's sake and wasn't afraid of if all of our fans didn't like us anymore. It took over really subtly, like before we could even notice it, that I think the records following that slowly became a little bit more homogenized and like pop oriented, trying to kind of match the algorithm of pop formula that was so successful. And in time, it just, for me, it felt stagnant, and like we weren't allowing ourselves to pivot and explore other places of art that were outside the bounds of what our fans were expecting from us. And so what that does is like it eventually makes you lose your authenticity. You slowly start to homogenize towards what the audience wants because it's safer for your infrastructure that you've built. You now have a lot of people that you're paying in the business. You have infrastructure. You've bought a house. You've got things that you need to pay for. If you don't make a good record that the fans like again, well, now you're going to maybe lose your house. You're going to have to start firing people. And so that fear is so strong that you will do anything to make it not happen, and you will homogenize slowly. And you lose touch with the potential genius that you have as an artist to make something that causes people to think, and some of them aren't going to like it. And that's where all the best art, I believe, is something that is polarizing, and some people love, some people hate, and it makes you think. But you can't get to that genius work by constantly homogenizing and playing safe. It takes really like being courageous to find what is meaningful to you inside and put that out with no care about what someone is going to think about it. I think that's the way we find our pure authenticity.
This is such a good microcosm of the difference between individual energy, tribal energy, and collective energy. I might butcher this as far as human design goes, but my understanding of it is like individual energy is innovation. Individual energy disrupts, it breaks from the pack, it creates something that has never existed again. It is the innovator. And because you can't innovate from homogenized energy. And then tribal energy creates a system out of the thing that the individual innovated. Mm-hmm. And then collective energy homogenizes it so it's available for like everyone. So the age of the cross of planning was an age of creating systems with that tribal energy, and then we had that collective energy homogenizing it. And because of that, we got a global food, global network, global framework. Exactly. Now we're at the end of the thing. It's a little bit too much, right? But there was a lot of innovation in there. Humans were able to work together to build, other places they got like high-speed rail and shit, but we got airplanes and we could drive roadways and all kinds of shit, that was because there was so much tribal energy and collective energy building structures and homogenizing them. And there's value to those things, but that's kind of like all we had. And so we know who all the individuals were, right? The individuals that actually broke through the energy of the homogenization and the system building, because they are the musicians that changed the world. A lot of them died before they were 30. The innovators. But now when you have homogenization and system building for 400 years, the thing starts to eat its own. That's what the aliens talked about a lot, and I didn't understand it, was things will evolve to the point where they self-destruct. Yeah. And this is kind of the nature of these ages, right? So in the beginning, it's a rough start, especially when you have a big shift of energy. Because sometimes we go from a collective with tribal to tribal with collective, whatever. This shift from tribal and collective, where our brains are constantly homogenizing things. So that immediate judgment when you hear music or you hear art you don't like is running it through the filter of, is this what it's supposed to be? You're not supposed to do that. Yeah. We did talk about this before on the podcast where, my first experience with having a podcast network, and they were like, it's supposed to be like this. And I'm like, podcasts have been out for fucking 10 years. What do you mean it's supposed to be like this? It's a made up thing. That's homogenized systematic thinking. And the way that people can't think outside of the two-party system is because they literally cannot think outside of the system. Where I'm saying, if you don't like what's happening right now with this administration, the answer is not a different administration. The answer is question this system. Why do we have a system that exists where every 4 years someone can come in and just gut what the last guy did? How does that make sense to anybody, right? But I'm wired as an individual, so I think about everything outside the box now that I have done approaching 10 years of unmasking and dehomogenizing my own, and I'm not done with that yet. But so what you're talking about and what we're seeing in art, which you're going to read this thing in a second that really, I love how it hammers this home, is the over systemization and over homogenization of art to where art kind of sucks now.
It's lost its powerful effect. Yeah.
And this is a great microcosm of what we're talking about with the energy. So what we're going into is a lot of individual energy. So there's going to be more innovation than we've ever seen before. Each person, especially all of the natural individuals, are going to explode into their creative power because they're not being influenced by a background frequency telling them that they should actually be system builders and homogenized, right? So that's why the individuals are kind of waking up first. And then there's some tribal energy in there as well. So then there will be a little bit of the ability to build some structures, but they're going to have to be structures that are opened up for innovation.
Decentralized.
And, that's not going to be tomorrow, but we're already seeing evidence of the background frequency is not going to support system building in a in a fucking pyramid shaped centralized thing, because you won't be able to organize people because they're all kind of going in different directions. So the entire mindset around creating art, the best art was always coming from the individuals. Always.
Yeah.
And then a genre would get built around it.
And then they would homogenize it, commodify it, and then make it available to everybody. And then you have a bunch of bands that follow the steps of that person.
Yeah.
And that's what's so funny is because the focus was get successful and make money. That's really it. And maybe deep down inside, artists have this desire, I want to make genius, influential art that lasts forever and is my legacy. But going at it at a way of David Bowie just succeeded and they love his record, I'm going to go follow and just mimic that because I want the success. And doing that, you're overriding this idea that you have to make genius, one-of-a-kind, original work. You're just copying somebody. Yes, you could get success and get a lot of attention, far as your soul being satisfied and feeling like it found something one of a kind of itself and expressed it. I don't think it's going to get satisfied like that. But if that's not your focus, you just want money and attention. And it used to work like that. But then you also are at the helm of where the trends follow. So your next record, what are the trends now? You got to follow that. It's a lot of work to just be following what works instead of just going inside and finding this genius piece that nobody knows what box to put it in yet. And so that feels scary. Like, how is it going to be accepted? I'm going to fail. We're like energetically discouraged to go do that. But I would argue all of the geniuses that we've experienced in these last couple generations that created one of a kind genius work were doing it from a place that they were not audience captured. They were not homogenizing. They were being super brave and going for what they specifically saw and was uniquely them. And that's why it worked so well.
Was David Bowie an addict?
Yeah, probably at some point. I mean, he didn't seem like an addict because he seems, if there was an addiction, he was addicted to art in some weird way and the expressing in different ways. I mean, I feel like he did, like in the 70s time, Coke was a different thing. I think he probably got into that, but it didn't seem to like tarnish his artistic expression throughout life. He was like always pivoting.
Well, I feel like I've been fascinated with the intersection of drug and alcohol abuse and really good art for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Bukowski.
Yeah, well, all of them. Like when I was young, there was a show called Behind the Music on VH1.
I loved that.
The thread was the same always. Is like really creative artist makes it, blows it on drugs and alcohol. And I think most really good, let's say before your era of making music, but really good artists in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, most of them that were not formulaic in the system were really hard to manage, whacked out on drugs and alcohol. Many of them died very young.
Yeah, and I think that's...
Because you're like suicidal when you're living like that. So you don't give a fuck about whether or not someone likes your next album. You're like, want to die.
And I think it's like a combined thing. I've been constantly for the last 10 years oscillating between this, trying to accept this for myself, wanting it to not be true because I consider myself an artist and I almost don't want to have to abide to this. But I do still believe like, really great art comes from tension, like no matter what kind of tension it is. But it to make really great art, you need gas and passion to go consistently show up and try to find that thing, and fight the temptation to be audience captured and homogenize. And so most good art is like coming from some kind of struggle that somebody had, and they can hone in those skills to transfer that emotional struggle and that tension into art to create beauty. And so they're creating it from that tension. So that's why I think a lot of artists, like they do fall into the trap of abusing drugs because they're trying to cope with the goddamn tension. And they almost sometimes they can like realize this is how I'm making the good art. And so they're going to medicate themselves to try to like deal with the tension. And some people can't, they medicate too much or lose control of that and then they die from it. But I feel like it's an effect of the artist's like kind of responsibility is to find that authenticity, be vulnerable and express it. And it's difficult work. It's really fucking tough to do. And it's tough to live in fear that like I'm being vulnerable and trying to be honest and a bunch of people might not like. And so having to deal with that fear and all of that, it's like people are going to medicate. But for me, I've started to try to just embrace tension. It's also all over my human design and astrology. And so it's like something I'm not going to be able to avoid. but trying to see the beauty in that tension as something that can catalyze really great expression and great art. But we have to kind of, for me, I'm trying to just have the courage to sit in that and know that that's going to generate good art, try to survive through it, and not abuse drugs, not abuse escapism, and accepting that's just kind of part of this like 3D reality. The binary thing causes clashing and it causes tension, but that causes growth. And so just accepting that as like a very valuable part of being an artist at this time, and embracing it and not falling victim to it, and getting lost in the kind of drug medicating of it. The other thing about that, like I feel even in my own life, is that when I was like in the early parts of Foster the People and the band that I had before that, Malbec, I was like living in our rehearsal studio, had no windows, in an alleyway in Hollywood. I lived there for 4 years and was doing everything I could to just make my art career like pop off. And so it was music at the time. It was like filmmaking and music, but it felt like in some places looking back, like I had nothing to lose. I had everything to gain. And I wanted, the success. I wanted money. I wanted like comfortability, and wanted attention. The tension of not wanting to be poor, not wanting the lifestyle I had, and wanting to get the prize, like made me work really, really hard and focus and find artistic, like authentic expression. Once we got success, and after a couple years of experiencing that new paradigm of like having freedom, being able to pay my bills and get, a lot of attention everywhere, it started to get more difficult to get to that place where you're making really good art from the tension. It's like I had to find tension now because I have money and I have the capability of paying for anything that I want, and everything kind of becomes easier. And so over the years, I realized that it was just very difficult to get into that same place that I was early on in Malbec and Foster the People, where I was so hungry for art, and the tension like didn't stop me. It was really activating the creativity. But when you lose the tension and you get the comfort, you don't have the gas anymore. And so you start to make art that's not quite as deep and not as tuned in to like, channeling what the collective kind of needs or whatever. And so for me, I've like in a way been trying to hunt and find that reality that I was once in, where like I had nothing to lose, everything to gain. And it's very hard when you have success and money. Like you literally have to create a world where you maybe don't have the money, or you don't have a promise.
Or you have like a toxic relationship.
Yeah. And you start to find it elsewhere. You're like, life will destruct. But for me, I've just been able to catch that and realize again, like, oh, the tension is something that I think we do want to escape at a certain point. But as an artist, like, it's part of the game for really good art. And I don't think I've gotten in arguments with people where it's like, I'm not saying we need to have pain and struggle to make good art, but it is definitely influencing it. And it might be part of this transition as we move out of the cross of planning and are not so much programmed towards homogenization that it might shift. But I guess I'm more advocating for a realignment in our perspective as artists, is not trying to run from the tension and the pain, is trying to like really embrace
transmute it.
And that's the purpose of the artist. That's like the gift we all have, is like we're capable of doing it, but it takes a lot of courage and a lot of like inner work to make that pain not eventually destroy you. It's really the transmutation is the goal, and it's difficult to do, but
yeah, I've always struggled to write when things were chill and easy in my life, and then I eventually find a stride. But it is like in comedy, it's like I have to make fun of something. I can't make fun of everything's positive, you know?
Yeah.
And so I definitely went through phases of not even I feel like I'm in one now. Like I don't know what the premise would be. And I do like to rant about things. And it really is, I can't hold a perspective of being in opposition to things for very long. It's kind of not in my nature. And so it is fun to like rant about it. I'm very unlikely to get stuck there for any extended period of time. Just because it's not how I'm wired.
For me, it really, like, I think, like, the eye-opening thing to me was when I realized that the sweet spot of creation and being able to just, like, finish ideas was when I had nothing and I was struggling. And so I think a really good lesson for all of it, as just, like, the experience I had is, and I tell this to people that I have sessions with, is like, you are in a place right now where you're not happy, you're uncomfortable with your life, and you want to be an artist. You have everything right there. It's like, it's so beautiful. What you have is like not having the stuff and having the gas to try to, the passion to get yourself out of the place that you're in via your art is so great. And keeping in mind that, like, if you get successful, you might lose that thing. And so really embracing, like, that process and knowing that there's, like, a really great gift there. And the gift is you're not happy with where you are and you want something else, and you'll do anything to do it. And so if you project that into your art, you will find the art that will liberate you from it. But keep in mind, that's where the sweet thing is. And once you get success, you need to have some kind of tension in your life to create it again. It doesn't have to be painful tension. It just needs to be some kind of activator. And so the way I felt when I discovered that was like, oh God, I lost it. How am I ever going to get back? I have to get poor again or something. And I've figured out other ways to get there, but it's just so much more work, where, like, I felt like I had it, 10 years ago. And, like, to get back to it is really difficult once you've gotten complacent and comfortable in life. Comfort doesn't really, like, activate good art, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just an interesting...
I don't think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but...
I mean, I've thought about this a lot over the years. For me, it was never financial. We talked about this, like, when we were young, in our 20s. We both had the experience of being, like, broke and then just, like, making art out of trash you find on the street. Like, I was extremely creative. I don't know how much of that is just, like, being in your 20s and just having a lot more energy than you have. You don't have kids and shit, responsibilities sucking your life force. But for me, whenever I've been in romantic turmoil, I've become extremely creative. Like, when I was going through that twin flame thing, I was not financially struggling, but I was, well, for a lot of that, I wasn't financially thriving, but I had, like, hacked abundance already. So I knew not to pay attention to that. But that, like, there were a few years where I was married and, like, happy romantically and had writer's block, but I was going through extreme, like, financial insecurity, and that didn't really channel into art for me. That actually channeled into being kind of paralyzed, and I think a lot of people kind of experience that now. But when I was addicted, the turmoil that comes from addiction and all of the, like, everything's so fucking dramatic when you're an addict, because you're literally, you need this substance to even be able to function. And so it brings a lot of darkness into your life. And it, for me, it brought, like, violence and all kinds of other stuff. And so that translated to a lot of creative energy for me. But then I was in near constant romantic turmoil. And some of my best art has come from, like, pain and grief of love stuff. And so for me, I have experienced a lot of writer's block during times where I was, like, on the love front. Okay. But then on times where I would be in like a toxic relationship, I'm like I'm writing poetry and shit that's not for like me to put out and be successful, you know? And so I think it's different for different people. The thing that I'm thinking of right now, because I remember retiring from stand up one of the 200 times that I did that. I had a lot of material when I first got clean because I had a lot of addiction material. And then there was a big lull for years where I just didn't know what to talk about because it just felt like there was nothing. I was broke, but there was nothing.
Not a lot of life experience.
Not a lot of life experience. You know, I think it's different for me because I'm like, I have to talk for art, you know? And so I remember saying, I don't know that I can be a comedian because I don't have anything to complain about. Like, I don't, you know, it is funny looking back because that is when I was like panic attack struggling with money, but I just didn't know how to translate that to, we were still very capitalist back then. And so if you complained about money, you know, the collective was like, well, there's something wrong with you that you can't make money or whatever. It's very different than it is now. And then I had kids, and then kids were, it was hard, you know, it's like I wrote an hour or two about having little kids, you know, and it was just like mom bitching or whatever, because I had that tension. And then moving on from there, I went back and started digging up my trauma because I was started to go through a healing journey and started talking about that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think where I was trying to go with the addiction part is that not just, yes, those people were using tension. Like when you're in that place of like addiction, especially people who are addicted like heroin and shit, shit's so dark. That addiction is so dark because you literally get sick if you don't have it. That there is a lot of like art becomes a way to survive. It becomes a life jacket or whatever. But I think more than anything, when you're living that kind of lifestyle or you're having a lot of dramatic experiences, you are not in your head. And I think what fucks artists up once they become successful is they start mentally strategizing something that they emotionally connected to the first time.
Yeah.
So when you are in turmoil, you are more able to access your emotional body, and sometimes art serves as the only thing to do to survive.
Yeah. And I think that's what's beautiful, like you mentioned, the transmutation, the potential of dealing with the tension, having the courage to like face it and go through. If you can transmute that into honest, really beautiful art, it actually, like, I feel like it changes that negative energy into a positive thing, that when someone listens, they subtly feel that energetic like transfer that has happened and they're drawn to it. And that's what it changes that like tension and darkness in the artist when they're able to go down and like make the real genius art and put that out. That negative energy goes into that song, but when someone listens to it, it transfers into inspiration and or somebody feeling like they're not alone because this person's going through it, and you change that energy, really, like you really change it and give it as a gift to someone else. And that is so fucking powerful. It changes everything, you know? And
yeah.
Let me read that Alex quote real quick. This is who I actually originally heard of audience capture from. I had felt it for a long time and didn't know how to speak about it. And Alex Ebert is the lead singer from what's the band name again now? Why can I not remember the band name? They sing that song Home. Home, yeah, we are home.
Alex Ebert was the lead singer too.
Why can I not think of the name?
Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic
Zeros. And Alex Ebert was like, he's been an artist his whole life. He was in a number of other successful bands. He's a really smart dude. I think his dad was a philosopher, and so he's taking on this philosopher role. He's like really trying to unpack culture right now. Some takes miss for me. Some are really on. This one's on. So the post says, it's just a image of text that says, "Dear artists, rejoice. Know your audience," in quotations, "is over. The new dictum is forget your audience." And then the caption is where it hits. He says, "Aspiring creatives have long been told to know their audience, a way to hack success by speaking directly to the tastes of a certain consumer group. The idea was to minimize creative risk by maximizing consumer appeal. This process turned the tables on creativity, making the creative act subordinate to the act of consumption, resulting in what is often called audience capture. An artistic process subordinate to audience desire, resulting in artistic products that conform to audience expectation. Obviously, as the so-called creative class institutionalized itself, this resulted in increasingly banal, unsurprising artistic output, sequels of sequels of sequels, and so on. All was fine. After all, knowing your audience was thought to be a bit of an art form in and of itself. But then along came AI, with consumer algorithm analysis far superior to anything any human could ever aspire to. And just like that, all those creatives who were taught to conform to their audience's expectations are now threatened by a machine that can do their little hack much, much better than they can. The move, stop conforming to your audience's expectations, return to daring."
So I've noticed that a lot of other people can't see this, and I don't know if this is the pattern. I have like intense pattern recognition, or the fact that just kind of like the life experience that I'm having, I'm able to see this. But when I tell you that the wheels are falling off, the wheels are falling off. People are losing the ability to build systems. Things that used to be very organized and put together were organized and put together because the humans were possessed by the need to build systems. And because they were possessed by the need to build systems, they had the ability to build systems. Everything is becoming very disorganized and chaotic. I mean, corporations, government, all of it is, the wheels are literally falling off of it. And, we've talked about this before, like trying to get a roof replaced on your house or something put in. It's like everyone's in a daze and can't do it. And that's because the background frequency that was once possessing people to contribute to the system is going away. And we are realizing how much that we need that in order to do things, right? AI has the potential of keeping a system together so that this doesn't just completely fall apart and no one can do anything. Humans are not going to have, some humans will, because some humans will be wired this way, but the vast, vast majority of humans are going to be possessed by individual energy. So they're going to be drawn toward innovating and authenticity and expressing and these new constructs. They are not going to be possessed by a drive to become very, very skilled at bricklaying or systems building in exchange for the bargain of money. And so the reason that we were all doing that is because we were possessed by that energy. And so I know I've said this a million times, but I feel like it hasn't clicked. AI shows up just in time to take over the systems and the homogenization in a way that could potentially, if we can make some moves in the right amount of time, which I don't know that we will, we could potentially offload that to AI because we are not going to be able to do it. So one of the biggest complaints about AI is that it's taking jobs. And you having a job is a construct of the cross of planning. Now, yes, capitalism unfortunately still exists. And so this is potentially going to be difficult for a lot of people. But if AI didn't come to take the job, your ability to do the job as a cog in a wheel was going to deteriorate no matter what, whether that be because you just have brain fog and can't do it anymore. You have some sort of physical thing happens to you. You literally feel like you're going to die if you go to the job one more day. Like, I think for younger people, they think, well, it's not fair. We don't get to do the American dream. I can tell you that there was a disillusionment that set in the 90s and the early 2000s for people who could still afford houses. There was already a disillusionment happening with the working your life away to be a part of this thing. This thing was dying no matter what. AI showing up to take over the homogenization and the systems could potentially be something that fucking saves us, because humans are going to be possessed with the desire to express authentically and to innovate. They are not going to be possessed with the desire to become skilled in one specific thing and to promote continuity. And so here, computers just at this perfect time can take this thing over. Now, if you have oriented your entire life around systems building, maintaining continuity, developing one specific niche skill, or homogenizing your way into success, yes, this is a disruption for you. That disruption was coming no matter what, because the background frequency is changing. So what I see so many people doing is fighting the idea of the AI, because they are trying to maintain an age that's fucking ending.
Yeah.
If your art can be replicated by a computer, because you know what they can't do? They can't innovate. AI is just an expression of what humans have already done. That's literally it. It cannot innovate. So it can only copy what's already been done. And if you're, the premise of whatever it is you do is a repetitive, homogenized thing, then yes, this disruption is coming. This disruption is coming as one of many changes to force us into a space of rapid innovation, because the world is supposed to become something we've never seen before. So much of the fighting of AI, or the concept or the potential of AI, is going to disrupt what has been. And it's like, yes, it's going to take my job. Yes, and then we will have to innovate something besides capitalism, because capitalism, late state, whatever the fuck this is, was based on the premise that we need to build systems and infrastructure. So we need an exchange, and your skill and your ability to create continuity is what determines your, like, all
it's
that.
Very competition based too.
Yeah. And so something very beautiful could come on the other side of it. And I get that it's hard to imagine, because we are very aware of the concentrated power right now. And we are like very aware of the potential to just be kind of forced into some nightmare fascist, whatever. That's not where the energy is going. And so if you took the exchange of money out of the thing, and I think I've said this before about AI, if you took capitalism out of it, are you still freaked out by it? Is it still going to take something from you if you didn't have to use your art to survive? And so the thing I really like about what he said here is, like, absolutely know your audience is a tribal, I keep on saying continuity, a tribal collective perception. Like, it's a do what other people want you to do to succeed. Mm-hmm. And what we are deconditioning right now is our nervous system imperative to be liked by the tribe, because otherwise I will starve. And what the new program says is authenticity or die. And as someone who has the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix in the exact same arrangement that we're going into, because there's 4 different Cross of Phoenixes, I have had my entire life this internal battle between, I guess, the programming and the conditioning of the Cross of Planning telling me that I need to homogenize and fit in and mask in order to survive, and an absolute, I'm going to die if I'm not authentic. And I have bounced back and forth between those things. And that has resulted in a lot of times I will be myself, and that will create some success. And then once I get some success, there is an expectation for me to continue to be that thing, which isn't authentic to me, right? And so then I get myself stuck and trapped in a thing. Like I had an authentic experience, supernatural experience with what I thought was Jesus. So I became a Christian, but then I outgrew that. And then I had a fear of offending that group of people. And so I got stuck there for a while. And then I got into 12 steps, and that helped me for a while. And I really identified with it. But then it was time for me to transform and move on. And then I was afraid of making those people mad. And then I had a popular podcast, but then I didn't like where I was, so I've done that my entire life. And I'm very familiar with I'm going to die if I'm not authentic. And we are going from, I'm going to die, I'm going to starve, my survival is connected to the tribe approving of me, into I'm going to die, I can't survive unless I am authentically expressing. That is what is going to be possessing people. Now, when you have people who, used to be electricians or doctors or lawyers, I mean, this community is filled with people who've already had this experience going from, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get trained in this one specific skill, because that is cross-up planning programming, to now I cannot show up at that job one more fucking day because it's not authentic to who I am. I cannot survive if I keep doing that, right? So that is the awakening experience of so many people. I mean, it's literally your experience. Yeah. Like you had complete burnout that took you years to recover from because you had the success, but it wasn't authentic to who you are. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think people understand the ramifications. This energy isn't even here yet fully. The ramifications for the working class when they are being possessed by that energy, many of them are not going to be able to work. That's it. They're simply not especially in like the service industry. There are people in the service industry that it's authentic to them, but many of them it's because they have to do something, right? They're not going to be able to do that because the background frequency, it's already there. I mean, this customer service doesn't exist anymore.
It's slowly really revealing itself.
You go to, and it's being reflected in people are not making a living because the bargain is dying. And so when people are afraid of the idea of robots or AI taking over, they think if the robots and AI weren't here, we could all just keep doing our jobs. But it's like, no, literally, we can't. We cannot. Now, a complete corporate takeover is a nightmare. I just don't think that's how it's going to play out. I think that if they want it to play out that way, they're going to have to do a universal basic income or something. Otherwise, you're just going to have the whole thing's going to get burned to the ground. I don't know what that's going to look like, but the fear of AI, I think, is actually a fear of the cross of Sleeping Phoenix in many ways, because if you want to keep any shred of this structure that we built when humans were capable of building it, you are probably need to hand it off to computers, because you're just not going to have just a fuck ton of innovators and artists and stuff. And it's going to take us a while to adjust to building any sort of culture around that. And so what I love about what he said is it's so cross of planning to have this mental strategy of know your audience and create art to be consumed by a group of people. And now it's kind of going in the opposite direction, whether we like it or not. Like consumers, I'm sure there will always be like the masses of, whatever, people that love the formulaic stuff. Mm-hmm. But people are going to be so drawn to very different, authentic, can't find this anywhere, doesn't sound like anything else, whatever, because we'll also be falling in love with that within ourselves. And I don't think that will translate to massive audiences. Yeah. Because everyone will kind of break off into their own thing that they think is niche and cool.
Which is also going to pop the illusion that you need to have a mass audience to be successful.
Right.
On any level, whether that's financially or your ego or whatever. And I talk about this a lot in sessions, that we're already there. Like if you know the internet and you're open to the new social media apps and all the different ways that you can, present yourself out and get some kind of exchange financially, you don't need a lot of people. It used to be like for musicians, you had to get on the radio and get in that mainstream thing for you to get success. That's how it used to be. Now, if you have 100 people that are diehard that love you and you get them on a subscription-based format in one of these social media things, you can make like a great living with 100 people, that are diehard. It's subscription-based. And I think that's how it's going to go moving forward. I always say it's like you started this a long time ago, but you have keys to certain people. When you're doing your authentic art, there are keys that you're unlocking to specific people that is beyond your scope of like knowing what kind of effect that's going to have. It's going to change people's lives because you have the direct key. So there's a lot of energy exchange going on just in that. But then, you can get yourself supported when you have just a small group of people that you have keys to that are diehard and ready for the next thing you make, even if it pivots completely left field. And that's going to be the sustaining thing moving forward. But I think a lot of people reading the room of looking for the same patterns that meant success in the old system, you're not going to find those. So it's like, that's this whole thing. What he's saying is stop, going for the big audience and trying to mold them. Just the audience will find you if you make your authentic thing. And that's going to be the commodity. That's going to be the new value moving forward, is like, what's different about you than the person down the street with the same tools?
What do you provide that I can't get from AI?
And that's the other thing is like the AI, I think there's like, everyone's jumping to the conclusion. I think AI is going to take a lot of jobs in the long run. We're going to love that. It's going to offload these jobs that people don't want to do. And where the misunderstanding is that I think it comes from movies, but that AI is going to just completely replace all of what a human brings to the table. And we jump to conclusions because we misunderstand the models that these AIs are built on. I think a lot of people assume that the AI has the ability to innovate and be like individualized and create ideas that have not been in the world yet. And I don't think AI is at that point, and I don't know if it will ever get to that point, essentially becoming sentiently conscious and like have an individual, unique perspective. So when the AI tools come in to the artist's world, that's where a lot of people are like, you're not taking my job as a musician. But if you just go look at like that fucking website, Suno, it makes AI music so good and you can kind of control it. And so not understanding it, it's easy to just be threatened by it and be like, well, shit, the AI is going to take all of artistic expression. And I think we're moving too quick to that. It will not take your individuality and what you have to present. But if you're not being authentic and working towards that, yeah, it's going to take your homogenized job. It's going to take the algorithmic pop song modality because it's going to be really good at that. But that pop song algorithm is not predicated on authenticity. So again, this is like your protection moving into this new world is now working on finding what your authenticity is when everybody has the same AI tools to create high productive quality content. What is different about you than the other person down the street with the AI? It's your individuality. It's your uniqueness, the weirdness, the specific perspective that you have is one of a kind. Like each person is brought up through different programming and different experiences that gives them this unique one of a kind perspective. If you're not trying to put that out, then yeah, there's not a timeline in the new Cross the Sleeping Phoenix that's going to be successful for you because AI is going to take all the homogenized jobs, And so realizing that, I think as an artist should be enough to go, there's nothing else to do right now but just find my uniqueness and individuality. And the battle is between you and yourself, the desire, the programming to homogenize for safety and get success. That's an illusion now. So the only thing to do is just courageously find your authenticity and be expressing that and adapting to these new tools, using the AI to express your individuality, your uniqueness. And that's what I find is so inspiring about the AI is it's now possible to create visual elements and sonic elements that we never could have done before. and we can use them to express a deeper authenticity and something that we imagine we want to see on the screen. It used to not be possible 10 years ago because of AI. Now it's possible. And the greatest example of that I've seen so far online, which has gotten so much resistance to it, is that AI video that's going around where it's a bunch of like the classic album covers and the artists seeing their album covers in like an art gallery and moving into them, like jumping into them. And so there's like Pink Floyd and Nirvana and Radiohead, and the AI has done it so good because it looks like Kurt Cobain is standing in front of his iconic album cover with the baby in the water, and it looks like Kurt Cobain. The camera's like circling around. It's not a real world. It's very illusionary. It's like a dream world. And then Kurt Cobain steps into that water and he's swimming in it, and the emotions on all the humans' faces are like what it would look like if they were able to step into that reality, almost like after they've left their legacy. It's almost like it's a Bardo world or something that the AI is showing you. And it creates so much emotional tension when you view it, because if you have connections with those records and the artists in general, you're able to see this new thing of like seeing the artists interact with their artwork from a point that's like later in history, where they themselves are realizing their legacy that they've left and the influence. And so that very short video, it's dreamlike, it's like activating. And for me as an artist, I'm inspired because I'm like, I never would have imagined being able to see that. And somebody thought of it and then, programmed the AI to do it. And now we can see it. And for me, it opened up my imagination of like, well, what is possible now? Like in my head, what do I want to see and what am I feeling is probably a way to do it with AI and get it out like we've never been able to do before. And so that video was passing around. A lot of people were shitting on it. I mean, most of the comments are like, I can't believe you're posting this. This AI is going to kill everything. How dare you? This AI trash. And nobody like actually just vulnerably watched it and was like, holy shit, this is so inspiring.
Well, yeah, who posted it? Questlove.
Questlove posted it. And I have always loved Questlove. I'm a drummer, of course. Super inspired by him. And I think he does have a philosophical standpoint right now that is probably very much not anti-AI. It's very much authenticity and the human experience. But he was obviously moved by that AI video and decided to share it. And his comment was even like, I know this is controversial and I'm typically on the other side, but every now and then I see a piece of AI art that it's undeniable. It's inspiring and very amazing to watch. And this is one, and, left it. And then, of course, just getting blasted in the comments. People like, I loved you forever, Questlove. I thought you were better than this. Like, fuck you now,
Unfollowing.
Yeah.
This is, to go back to the beginning conversation, this is the tribal thing where you like the art that Questlove puts out. Maybe you like some of his opinions, but then the second he does something that's outside of what you think he should fit in, then you guys are going to... And then also the way that people are trying to solve what they perceive to be the problem of AI by like shaming and guilting people
that use it.
Yeah, because lots of people have brought this to my attention or asked us to talk about this. I talked about it on the Patreon, but the like energy and water use of AI.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, they definitely need to innovate a way that uses less energy and less water. I mean, water specifically, it should be used in a recycling capacity. The way that is being used by people who are just resistant to the idea of AI as like a gotcha, where to me, the number one user of those things, specifically water, is the big ag. And
fashion industry, isn't it? Fashion
industry is number two, I think.
Water consumption.
So much water consumption. And I think there is a general understanding that the fashion industry is nuts, and the way that people are buying clothes according to trend and whatever. I think one of the biggest kind of, I don't want to say scam, but something that we are extremely out of balance with nature is the way that we are doing agriculture and the way we are using how much energy to ship foods across the world when our bodies are kind of wired to do better eating things that are local. You've got these monocrops. We're using an enormous amount of water. I don't want to fuck another stat up on this, but I think it's something crazy, like a gallon of water per almond or something nuts.
Almond milk.
Google that yourself. And there was a point where I used to drink a shit ton of almond milk, and I did switch from almond milk because it was just
because of that.
But there are just many other things. Everything we are doing, every industry is so out of balance with nature and so stupid. And the way that we're doing it, the way that we systematically homogenized everything so that everyone could have everything everywhere rather than looking at it from reality, which is like, I live in this region, which means I maybe don't have access to dates 365 days a year, you know? So everything needs to be reviewed from the perspective of being in balance with the earth. And I think that will come with the elevation of consciousness. Now that AI has started to take off, allegedly the people involved with it are already working on creating something more sustainable. Who knows? I don't trust corporations, so we'll see. But Deepseek, I believe, uses less energy. I'm not
a ton
sure.
less energy. They like showed it that it's possible to make a similar model with half the energy consumption. I think that's like, we're going to slowly be innovating ways to dial in energy consumption and everything. But to me, my first thought when you brought this up a while ago, that there was AI was using all this water. And I remember cryptocurrency had the same kind of drama come out.
Yes, coincidentally, everything that has the potential of democratizing reality is coincidentally the thing that gets passed around the most.
While all these billionaires are still flying in their fucking crazy gas-guggling jets. And it's a hypocrisy is insane. But to me, the thought was, again, it was back to the singularity thing. AI is a gift. It's something that is going to liberate us. We don't understand it yet. It's been purposely villainized, so there's resistance to that. But the AI, there's certain benchmarks, I feel like, in evolution. And as you start to extend into the tech is becoming so quickly advanced that we almost don't know how to understand how to use it. And it seems like to me that innovation has really like, it's sped up in the tech world, but we're still on a system-based energy consumption that's like archaic as fuck. We're trying to have AI take over all these systems and become integrated as like a liberating tool on a system that's using coal to burn and keep the fucking computer going. Right? They're like so out of alignment that you can't get to the AI integrated reality without changing your energy consumption. And this is what's so frustrating to me, is that the 0 point energy thing is around. It's there. It's like proven in so many different circles. And I believe that like there are people that have it on the world stage and are actively keeping it from us. And so this is one of those things where like if the singularity is like we're getting closer and 0 point energy is allowed to come in, it sets the table for all of these other tech ideas that we have to actually be able to be implemented and be exponentially adding and growing, not taking too much energy, taking too much water, take all of that, you know. And I would agree, it's in all systems. It's like the agriculture, fashion industry, this consumer world that's based on ease and convenience is created like a degrading system, a system that's like got more output than input kind of thing. Like it's not balanced at all. And so I think that that's what's frustrating is like that. And it's from a place where people are naive and we don't understand enough, but to start bitching about like, yeah, we can't do the AI because it's too much water. It's like, no, the fucking system, dude, it's like everything's backwards. That's not the reason to stop the AI.
Let's stop killing everyone who comes out with 0 point energy. Let's start there.
Yeah. And I think it's just, we're going to have to go through a transition where new tech comes in and it is extremely wasteful to use it. We're going to have to adjust and figure out until finally the 0 point energy is just allowed to come in. I just don't think it's ever going to be allowed to come in. It's going to end up being a necessity or something that they can't micromanage and control anymore. And then we start to build on top of that. They can't let it come through because it is the clear destruction of all of these systems that they've been operating on. But that's my take on it, is that we're just, this is that growing process where we've innovated the tech kind of before we laid the foundation for proper energy consumption, where there is an even amount of input and output. That's the only reason we can't get to it.
Well, one thing that, after people have gone through their deconditioning from homogeneity, whatever, to individuality, is that the vast majority of people are going to be innovating. And so we are so used to a gate-kept system in which every time there was an individual, one of these gate-kept systems would grab them. So you get an artist who makes amazing art, they get pulled into the music industry, blackmailed, whatever. We're learning about all that. You get an innovative thought leader, they get captured, blackmailed, put into the system, or they mysteriously commit suicide. We have lived in this gate-kept system in which the system, because why? Because the background frequency was supporting systems and making them more powerful, would grab any innovator and prevent the innovation from coming forward. But what do you do when the vast majority of the world is now being possessed with the energy to be an innovator? You're not going to be able to stop 0 point energy. You're not going to be able to stop decentralization. You're not going to be able to stop. And that's why you feel this clamping down coming right now, where they're trying to get a hold of TikTok and everything else. It's because they fucking know what's coming. The Kool-Aid man of individuality is about to come busting through that wall, and you're not going to be able to stop it. And if you've been in the process of deconditioning for the last 7 to 10 years or whatever, since 2017, when this energy really started to come in, but then heavily in 2020, like, you are being prepared, I believe, to be a model of individuality when that energy hits fully and people are just kind of drowning in it and don't know what to do, because the first thing that will go is the structure of the system. The limitation that comes from the destruction of the system, or the system collapsing, will cause innovation. And so going back to that Deepseek thing, there was like gatekeeping happening in the US because the US was trying to win the quote unquote arms race of AI. And the thing that the United States has done with its monopolies and its control system, and its concentration of power, is it's really stifled innovation here. And so people are really thinking inside of a box, and then they're also greedy and so obsessed with maintaining power that they're just thinking in a really limited space. And so they had it in their minds that you can only create AI using these chips. So the way that will stop everyone else from being able to create it is by hoarding the chips or whatever. And something in that chip hoarding led to, was it a Chinese company or a Singaporean company?
It's a Chinese company.
A Chinese company
who had bought the chips originally for an algorithmic. They were doing like financial stuff.
They're trying to build something like BlackRock has that predicts the market.
A model, yeah. And they got a hold of some of these chips, and only so many, somehow doing it through a backdoor, they got a hold of enough, did what they were trying to do the project for, and it didn't work. It didn't outperform the algorithm they had already programmed to do this financial investment work. And so then they were like, well, we have all these chips. What should we do with them? And then they just, as a B plan, were like, oh, maybe we can try to create one of those AIs, like a GPT. Let's just do that. And they did it, and it worked on half the chips, half the energy consumption. And then they made it open source and gave it to everybody, which just is like a fuck you to the West trying to hoard the chips and control the innovation, Yeah,
so ChatGPT is made by OpenAI, and I believe the reason its name was OpenAI is because it was originally supposed to be open source, and then that guy...
And Elon was with them, and when dude said it's not going to be open source anymore, Elon bailed. because he was like, I'm not doing it. It's supposed to be open source. What do you fucking mean this is going to be blocked?
And now they hate each other, and that's very funny. And then Trump announces this 500 billion, was it 500 billion or 500 million
I think it's
investment of the United States into the infrastructure of the AI, whatever. Anyway, these guys were all just planning on gatekeeping and becoming the world leaders in AI. And then here comes this side project from China that's open source, which now, why is anyone going to buy your AI thing? Because we can get it here. And it's not, open source isn't completely decentralized, but it's a huge move toward decentralization. And this is just an example of how much trickster energy is going to be infused into everything you've ever known to be. And we're just going to watch them concentrate power and fail, and then try to concentrate power and then fail. Everything that worked for you in the cross of planning is not going to work for you in the cross of sleeping Phoenix. You have to learn new things. And that goes for them as well. Their power is not handed to them by the fucking universe. It was handed to them by the background frequency. And
by us.
Right. But like, because we were organizing in systems, right, and they were system type people, right? So this is going to be, in the short term, sure, you might see them concentrating power and doing things that suck and actually hurt people. But in the long term, you're going to watch this mostly fall apart. And like I said, I'm going to get into this more on my Patreon, but this specific administration, the promise it's making to people, literally it's in the slogan, is to bring the cross of planning back.
Yeah.
And it's not going to work.
Yeah. It's almost like they're going to maybe make a couple moves that are trying to control power, and they'll make moves that they think are going to benefit them, but then the trickster energy is going to make their move actually quicken the destruction or allow a new innovation to decentralize and come in quicker than it can micromanage and clean that up. And I think we mentioned this on the last, or maybe it's the one that we didn't release, but the thing that I was talking about with TikTok, like it was so clear within the ban. You know, this idea of singularity is that the technology is going to be advancing so quickly. At a certain point, humans will not be able to keep their minds around what the tech is doing and what's capable of it. So it gets past a point of it develops so quickly that the humans can't adapt quickly enough to be able to understand or even control and prevent things that's going to maybe liberate people from the tech. And TikTok ban was like a really great example of this phenomena that I think is going to be an aspect of making it so we don't have to, as the systems collapse, that we don't have to go through a dark period where like energy's gone, internet's off, and all of that. I don't see it happening like that anymore. There's going to be like a quick shift. And the TikTok ban was so interesting because there's like all the legislative like dialogue around why we needed to ban it. It was all this like, you know, Chinese military like protective stuff. We don't want them to have your data, all that kind of stuff. You know, really obviously the reason was they can't control the information on there and they can't censor it. And so we're all connecting and talking to each other about ideas. That's what they want to stop. But even understanding that, they still don't, like, everybody in that fucking courtroom that was there to ban it didn't understand exactly what TikTok was. They see it as just some kind of toy that the kids are using, and then they happen to be talking about a bunch of things that the government doesn't like. But they don't understand that the TikTok has created a new language, has created a subculture, this underground world that people have adapted new language. The meme language is like, just goes over the head of most of these people that are still controlling the systems. And they couldn't even actually argue with the TikTok CEO that had like very rational explanations to their worries, to the point where it was like, you have no proof. These ideas that you're saying this is dangerous, like you actually have no proof. And so they were kind of caught in a place where they realized we don't even know what this is really, like to the point where they thought they could just turn it off and nobody would bitch. But as we got closer and closer and they were about to turn it off, they realized there are 7 million people in the country that are like making money off of this and have businesses, and you're just going to turn it off. What are all these people going to do? They're going to come for your throat, you know? And I think they then got scared, and it was like, oh, okay. And then the ban got soft banded, and now it's like they're going to slowly try to get, you know, weasel in there. And I think that's a great example of like we're going to see more and more of this where people are innovating and decentralizing and working kind of in the underground internet world and setting things up. And it's going to be moving so quick that it's like going to be outside of the realm of these ancient old men that are controlling all of the rules, that they won't even be able to stop it. They're going to pivot to try to control it. And the people are already going to be pivoting to go to the next state. And so they're constantly, it's going to be this game of cat and mouse that they will not be able to control it all. It's just going to innovate past them. And that's what's so, that TikTok, it's like the perfect example. I used to see TikTok in kind of the same light. Like this is just for, it's vanity and kids just dancing, until I really got involved in it and like watch and observe the individuality that is blossoming and people making money off of dumb, mundane things. And they're able to like find this flow. And it's so inspiring and creative. There's something bubbling up within that I think is going to, it has a lot of legs and a lot of life. If you turn off TikTok, it's going to pivot and go to a different app. It has so much life to it that you can't stop it. And so I think it's just going to be an uncomfortable time in the transition of it oscillating in and out of things, maybe getting banned for a moment, but then it popping up somewhere else until we finally just sustain our kind of own, you know, decentralized systems, and eventually the rest of that stuff just falls off, you know?
Yeah, the imperative to express and to start to become individual expressions and to witness other individual expressions, like that's going to manifest in the reality. So I don't resonate with the belief that, oh, they're going to take over and everything's going to be like, everyone's basing what they think is going to happen on things that have happened in the past. And it's like human consciousness is in a different place. The human consciousness, specifically in the United States, is different. And the cross of Sleeping Phoenix, we don't have a precedent for. So if the background frequency is driving us to express individuality and to decentralize and to become creative, innovative artists, that's going to appear. It's probably not going to last in one place because there is no continuity in the cross of Sleeping Phoenix the way there has been. So it may very well be app to app to app. And you might have resonated with one app, but then you don't resonate with the other app because it's not about continuity, you know? But that innovation is not going to stop. It doesn't matter if it appears in the moment that the control system is about to clamp in. That's an illusion. They want you to believe that. Mm-hmm. We have to go in a second because I have to handle something, but that kind of goes back to the, like, in the background, what's happening in the spirit. I hate the spiritual war thing, but like the spiritual war that's happening is we are shifting into a completely different type of existence. Besides the cross of Sleeping Phoenix, we're doing this fourth density thing where everything's becoming more supernatural. We have more points of awareness. There is a group of beings or whatever that is trying to capture as many beings in the new thing as they can. So that's what you feel. I feel it.
Yep, totally.
I really feel it right now. But that ain't the party I'm playing. And so I guess that's the split, is like people who want to move into this new kind of supernatural reality, still obsessed with the idea of being dominated, are going to go get dominated, I guess. But it's clear as day to me that there is an alternate path towards individuality and decentralization and self-authority. Those are literally the constructs of where we're going if you choose to step into your own power.
And that's like, so the protection in that split is if you embrace your authenticity, you'll be fine. It's that simple. Like, if you're obsessed with your individuality and autonomy and you're working, even if it's small steps, and you're working towards that, you're working towards being protected by it. Because I think that the level of like illusion and like control is going to become very subversive and hard to detect. If you're motivated by the safety of homogeny, like you'll fall into that without even knowing it. And it still may be like an upgraded reality. Like there might be universal basic income, but that's going to be another control arm if you don't know how to operate outside of that and all of those things. So again, that's why I tell everybody in sessions, I'm like, at some point I try to just explain the way I feel, where it's like, there is nothing else to do in this reality right now, but find your authenticity. And if you're wanting success in whatever art you're doing, great, that you want that success, but like, you're not going to get it unless you are finding your authenticity. And finding out also like just what you think is your authenticity right now might be a lot of masking and people pleasing. It's like, that ain't it. You got to keep moving towards, I think, expressing authentically in reality right now. It's supposed to feel fucking scary and terrifying. It's supposed to feel like you're jumping off into the abyss. And that's a sign that you're like, you're embracing your authenticity, because your authenticity has not been seen fully by anyone if you haven't been in it. And so it's going to feel foreign and fucking terrifying. If you're comfortable in it, it's like maybe not enough, you know, like,
right. If the systems didn't go balls out corrupt, then you wouldn't wake up out of the dream of the systems, you know? And I always spent a couple episodes ranting about the they. I think my point in that is waking up to the fact that power corrupts, and not to encourage. It's tough because I think from a perspective of very like personal autonomy. And so if I see that the thing is corrupt, my thinking is not someone needs to bring them to justice, because I don't think from the perspective of authority. I have an issue with authority. I don't think we need someone to come do that. Like when I go to the doctor, it's like, I don't like to be talked to like you're the authority of my body. That's insane to me. I don't think that way. And so sometimes when I'm raging against the machine, I'm more raging against people's belief in the machine than the actual machine, because it doesn't scare me that the machine is it's been becoming fascist. That doesn't scare me. I go, yeah, well, you're just going to overstep and get completely fucking guillotined. That's fine. You know, you're going to figure out what happens with your obsession with power and domination. And for me, I have my own desire to dominate. And so I work on my own desire to dominate, because the less I have a desire to dominate, the less I'm going to have that. I'm going to be contributing to that shadow reflection. And so, yeah, I think it's how we interact with that. Like, to me, it doesn't scare me at all. The thing I'm just going to get better at crime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's simply it. The collective will have to reconcile their need to be lulled into comfort by the illusion of a, you know, benevolent authority that's going to tell them what to do. I mean, it's just simply not where we're going. So redefining our own ideas of success, our own definition of safety, building our own communities, building our own structures, building our own systems, small scale, and becoming obsessed with protecting our autonomy in a way that is not begging daddy to let you have your autonomy.
Yeah.
All right, I have to go because we have to handle something.
Beautifully said.
And then we'll do the other things we were going to talk about. We'll just do those in literally 2 days when we have to record next week.
Oh, yeah. We got more to talk about.
Yeah. Mark has sessions, markpontius.com.
I do have sessions. Come book with me. I want to talk to you about your creativity and your authenticity.
I don't think I have any. I have a Patreon. Okay, love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.